Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Emma, and today we are going to be talking about all of the books that I read in August. So I read 18 books in August, which is a lot of books when you think about it. And I don't even remember a lot of them. So we're gonna go through my list, got my storygraph up, and I'm gonna talk about them, what I liked, what I didn't like, and let's just get into it. The first book that I read in August is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. This is sort of a Shakespeare retelling, but instead of focusing on Shakespeare itself, it focuses on Shakespeare's wife Agnes and his family and the people that he kind of left behind when he went to London to become famous. This book also, at the beginning of the story, you know that it kind of centers around the death of Hamnet, who is Shakespeare's son, who died of the plague. It's not really a spoiler, it's in literally the description of the book. But so we follow Agnes and Shakespeare as they kind of meet and then fall in love, have a family, etc. I actually started this book last year, and it took me so long to find time to actually finish it and my hold to come in again. So I finished it, and I think it's a solid book. It's like a very dense, like, historical literary fiction novel. Not a lot happens, I would say, but that doesn't mean that it's not enjoyable. And I think the writing was really interesting, the imagery was good, and I did enjoy the story. I thought the writing was great. I thought the story was slow at some parts. It does take a really long, it did take me a really long time to read it, regardless of if I hadn't, like, returned it in November. And I think, like, if you are really into William Shakespeare, you'll probably like the book more, but for me, it was a solid book, but nothing that I would be recommending to people unless they were like, I really want a literary fiction book about Shakespeare's life. I'd be like, do I have the book for you? But it's even better because it's about women. So that was Hamnet. It was good. Again, if you're looking for a historical fiction, super literary book, this is it. But if you're not really in that mood. And then I read The Singles Table by Sarah Desai. This is the third book in her sort of interconnected standalones. I read two romances where the male love interest, has the name Jay. So this is the first one. This is the singles. So this is just a classic romance. We have Zara, I believe. Yes, we have Zara, who, she's quirky, and she's just a funny gal, and every wedding, she sits at the singles table and she kind of makes it her mission to, like, match up couples, and she's, like, pretty good at it. So she meets Jay, who is, like, very stoic. This is very much Grumpy Sunshine. Very stoic, and he is like, I'm not looking for a relationship. She's like, oh, guess what? I'm gonna find you a girlfriend. She wants to meet a celebrity client because she's, like, a celebrity lawyer, and I don't know why he wants to find someone. She just kind of ropes him into it. And, you know, they clash immediately because she's, like, super bubbly and funny and silly. And he's very, like, stoic. He's, like, ex-military but has a security company. And so, obviously, through the course of them, like, sort of having this deal where she's like, I'm going to find somebody for you. And he's like, okay, then I guess you can be my clients. They fall in love. I actually liked this book. I think this was my favorite. This is my favorite out of the three by Sarah Desai. The first one is Marriage Game, and the second is The Dating Plan. I thought this one was fun. It was a really classic, super easy to read romance. Like, nothing outwardly special about it, but Zara and Jay were really cute together, and I do remember that I was having a really good time reading this rom-com. So it was a good fun time. It's nothing extraordinary, but if you are looking for just like a quick, easy read rom-com and one that also focuses on like Indian culture, this would be a good book for you. Next, I read Good Girl, Bad Blood by Holly Jackson. This is the second book in the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, which is just a YA mystery thriller series. The first book is A Good Girl Guide to Murder. I'm not really going to talk about too much the plot of this book because mostly it just follows everything that happens in the first book. We have our main character, Pip, and she decides for her school project that she is going to revisit a murder that happened 5 years ago that she's like, this doesn't sit right with me. I don't think this is what actually happened. So she digs up all this dirt and just this, the first book is literally insane. So good, but so crazy. And so this is the second one, which is just kind of like her, she's solving a new mystery. It's obviously, I have to read them in order, but I ate this shit up. I think the series is fantastic. I think the writing is great. I think the story is great. It's super dark for a YA, which I love. I think Pip is a great character, and I think she's really complex. And I also really liked how in the second book they talked a lot about the trauma that she experienced in the first book, because nothing that happened, like so much insane shit has happened to her. And so I'm glad she wasn't just like, cool, on to the next thing. I'm glad they sort of like talk a lot about like grief and like PTSD and like still lingering on things that had happened to you. And so I think this is just a fantastic series, and I'm so excited to read the third book. I don't know when I'm going to get to it, but I definitely need to prioritize it. I also have the novella, so. But anyways, if you really want like a YA thriller mystery, but like a darker YA thriller mystery that I think just like, it's not like fun and light, it's like in there. Anyways, so it's a great book. And then I read Legends of Lattes by Travis Baldree, and then the like novella prequel, Pages to Fill. If you've been in any sort of fantasy videos, if you've watched those in the past year, you've heard people talking about this book. This book kind of took the world by storm and kind of created the terms cozy fantasy, which I didn't really know what cozy fantasy was until people were talking about this book. But anyway, so this is about Viv, and Viv is an orc, and she sort of like an assassin, mercenary, kind of like doing things for money, killing things from, you know, she's a mercenary. She is taking jobs and everything, and then she finishes her last job and she's like, all right, peace out. I'm gonna go to this random town, small town, and open up a coffee shop. And that is literally exactly what she does. And this book is just her opening up her coffee shop and sort of like trying to find her way in this like small town. And nobody knows what the fuck coffee is. So she's bringing that to light and just very much found family, and just like, it's a really short book. Yeah, it says it's only 305 pages, but it was like 150 on my tablet. But just like found family and hanging out and just super cute and sweet and wholesome. And I think this is a fantastic book. And the novella before it was fine. I mean, it was just like a prequel novella, like 30 pages. But I would recommend reading Legends of Lattes first before reading Pages to Fill. It was just at the end of the book, and I'm going to count it on here because I did technically read it. But yeah, just like cozy fantasy books are now like one of my favorite things, and this book was just so amazing. And I understand now. I'm so happy it can be part of the hype and understand why everybody loves it, because it was great. Next I read Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. This is a college sports romance, which is not really my normal romance. That's not really my normal romance go-to. Oh, hello. In this book, we have Nathan and Anastasia. And Nathan is a hockey player, and Anastasia's a figure skater. Butt heads, because the hockey rink is like decommissioned because of a prank gone wrong. Blah, 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 blah. They have to share one rink. And obviously, they're like not going to be getting along. But of course, as the book goes on, they, you know, fall in love. This book is insanely long for like nothing to have happened. This book, it was just boring. Because it's like they go to parties and then they like have sex, and then they go to a party and then they have sex, and there's like a little bit of the conflict, which was drawn out for the entire book when I feel like it was very, I don't know. I will give kudos to Nate for having great emotional maturity. Like, the conversations that this couple had in this book, like, were great and fantastic, and how I wish all romances could go, because they were both, like, open with each other. But I just feel like I would have liked this book a lot if I had read it when I was, like, 19, 20, and, like, or 19 or 20, and this was, like, my life. But being 24 and not going to, like, college parties anymore, I didn't really care. And it was a lot of college parties, which is totally fine. It's fine to party in college. I'm 25 now, so that is, like, not what my life is. So I just think this book was fine. If you want a really long, dense romance with mostly just, like, pining and sex and not a lot of plot, I think this book would be great. It just was so unnecessarily long, and I just, by the end when I finished it, I was like, that's it? Like, I went through all these pages, and, like, it also didn't help that I read the physical copy, and not on my tablet, because I feel like romances go so fast on my tablet because they're, like, all 220 pages, so it feels like nothing. But yeah, I was not impressed. This is one of the books where, like, the hype exceeded the book, and I was kind of like, eh. Then I read Gallant by V.E. Schwab. This is like a YA mystery horror, I want to say. Fantasy? Okay. Mysterious. Dark. This book is about Olivia, and Olivia was dropped off when she was a baby at this kind of, like, boarding school for girls. Orphans, I think most of them are. She doesn't know anything about her family, where she came from. She has, like, her mom's journal that was left with her, and, like, nothing else. And then one day she gets a letter kind of, like, calling her back home to Gallant, which her mother in her journal was like, Olivia, never go back to Gallant. But Olivia doesn't have anything else going on. They basically just send her away. And they're like, go back. And she's like, okay. And then she gets there, and there is her cousin and two sort of, like, groundskeepers. Yeah. They're like, nobody that lives in this house sent the letter. So then she's trying to unravel the mystery of, like, what the Pryors are and, like, her family. And there's, like, a garden wall that you're not supposed to go to, and why is everything in the garden dying? And I will say this book was very predictable. Really predictable. Because it was just a really simple YA book. But I did like it. I thought it was easy to read. The illustrations were really cool, and sort of, like, seeing her mom's journal entries and the pictures in the book, like, I definitely would recommend reading, like, a physical copy just so you can, like, see them. So I would recommend reading it physically. The pictures were really cool, but it was just, like, really predictable and not terribly original. But if you're in the mood for kind of, like, a dark-ish YA novel, but, like, something that isn't too dark, with, like, a little bit of fantasy, kind of magical realism, magical realism almost, then pick this book up. Then I read Terms and Conditions by Lauren Asher. This is the second book in the Dreamland Billionaire series. If you watched my July wrap-up, I read Fine Print. Did not like it, but I actually really liked this one. I know you're surprised because you saw my August DPR too, and you were like, oh my god, she's really not excited to read that book, and you would have been correct. I actually thought this book was so good. Um, so this book is about Declan and Iris, and Declan is the oldest brother in the, I don't know what their last name, Kane. Declan is the oldest brother, and his sort of task from their grandfather, because their grandfather left them all tasks in the will because they're rich, they own Disney Dreamland. Give them all tasks, and Declan's task is to get married and produce an heir, which is gross and weird. And his assistant Iris, who, God bless her, is trying to find him a wife, but Declan he is the grumpy in the Scrumpy Sunshine. He is like, just keeps ruining every relationship, and so Iris is like, alright, cool, I will marry you. And so they get married, they get engaged, and it's just kind of about them falling in love. You know, obviously Declan's been pining for her forever. I really liked this one. I thought it was just a solid read. I loved Iris. I think she's one of my favorite, like, heroines that I've read in a romance book in a really long time. I loved her humor, and I thought she was super smart, and also just, like, didn't take any shit. Like, when Declan was being a dick, she was like, okay, goodbye. Like, I'm done. Like, go fuck yourself. And I thought that was really admirable I just loved it. I loved this book. I ate it up. I could not put it down. It was a solid read. I am picking up the third one. We'll see. I mean, she's 1-1 Lauren Asher, so it could go either way, but yeah, no, I thought this was a great romance, and you don't need to read the first books if you just want to skip ahead to this one, which I honestly would recommend because I did not really like the first book. The Boston employee age gap tropes were a little bit meh for me, but honestly, once I kind of got going into the story, I didn't even really notice. I was just having so much fun, like, watching them just, like, bicker, and their banter was really great, and just, I don't know, solid read. And then I read How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. So Grady Hendrix is known for his horror writing, and this book did not disappoint. I was fucking terrified. But this focuses on Louise, her parents die randomly, and she has to go back to her childhood home to sort of, like, team up with her brother and, like, take care of everything in the house. But there is something in the house that does not want them to sell it or, like, sort of change anything. Let me tell you, so I read this book in one night. Big mistake, because it was dark, and I was so fucking scared when I was reading it. I thought I wouldn't really get scared when reading books, but this one, oh my god, I was so scared. Like, it had me shaking, but it was so good. I, again, ate the shit up in one day. It was just exactly what I needed to read. I kind of, like, was in, like, a mini slump after Terms and Conditions, and I was just like, nothing was sounding great, so I just picked this book up, and I just could not stop reading it. It was fantastic. Obviously, like, if you are lighthearted and not really in the mood to read, like, something spooky, definitely, like, maybe think about it. I also think, I don't want to say what the spooky element was, but it is something that, not that I've dealt with, but, like, I've been around the spooky element before, and you'll know it if you read it. And, like, so reading it, I was just like, God, it was so good. Does anybody else look at the reviews for books to see if, like, you feel validated? Like, I don't know, I think this is my favorite Grady Hendrix book that I've read so far, because I've read Final Girl Support Group and Southern Book Club's Guide. Just, it doesn't matter. Anyways, so, especially as we're getting into spooky season, pick this book up if you want to be, like, terrified and also a little grossed out, because there definitely were some scenes where I was like, ugh. And then I've read The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi. This is sort of like a dark fairy tale book. Focus on Indigo. We don't focus on Indigo, but Indigo is sort of like the main, everything revolves around her. But it is her, and she marries this person whose name we don't know. He's known as Bridegroom. And so it's told from his perspective in the present. And then when they get married, Indigo's like, you can never ask any questions about my past. And because this man is a simp, he's like, sure. So they get married, and slowly throughout, oh no, she gets back in home. He goes with her, and then he starts finding these things out about her past. And so about probably like 15-20% of the way through, we get a second POV, which is from the past when Indigo was in high school, and it is her friend Azure? Anyways, and then so we get kind of like Indigo growing up from Azure's point of view, and then the Bridegroom like trying to uncover kind of the mystery. So it's very weird magic, the magic system. There's magic in the book, but it like doesn't make any sense. And so it's kind of like a gothic fairy tale mystery. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. I think the writing was gorgeous, but I predicted the plot twist. That was fine. But I think just like the magic system was really confusing. It didn't make any sense. But the imagery was really gorgeous. The Bridegroom's point of views were pointless. I didn't understand why he had to say what happened. But overall, if you're kind of looking for something that's dark but like still is giving fairy tale, pick this one up. It's very like dense prose. Like the descriptions are really, I definitely did a little bit of skimming, but I will say it didn't get going to the last like 20%, but I was, kind of like, oh shit. I did predict the final twist. There were some other things that happened where I was like, oh my god. But pretty good. Pretty good book. Definitely dense, but okay. Then we get to the second book, romance book that I read with a main character named Jay. And that is Trouble with Hating You by Sanji Patel. This one was part of my video series where I talked about where I tried to finish books I was in the middle of, part 1. So I finished this. Yay! Because I'd been reading it for a few months. But this is just like a very typical, I wouldn't say enemies to lovers, but Leah, her dad is very traditional and wants her to get married, and she is like, absolutely not. I do not want an arranged marriage, and because of some trauma from her past. And so he sets her up with Jay against her will, and then she runs out, and then she finds out that Jay is actually a lawyer that was hired to save the company that she's working for, because the company that she's working for is like going under. Very minor plot in the book. But anyways, they sort of kind of strike up a begrudging friendship to try and save this company, and then slowly fall in love. I actually liked this one. This book was really good. It was heavier than I was expecting, which I talked a little bit about, so definitely read trigger warnings if you're going to pick it up, because it definitely dealt with some heavy topics. But I think that while it was hard to read, especially the way that her father and members of the community kind of treated her, I think that the author does a really good job of showing that those people's opinions are not correct, and we'll just say The Trouble with Hating You was a solid book. Okay, and then I read Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. This was another book that I finished in the finishing books in the middle of the video. I talked a lot about it in the video. This was a disappointing read for me, especially because so many people talked it up, and so many people were talking about Naomi Novik. This is just like a Rumpelstiltskin retelling. I don't know. I'm really caught up in the fact that at the end we had like 7 POVs and I didn't really know what was going on, and ultimately this book was just like a disappointing wintry fantasy. But pick it up if you want a winter fantasy with like heavy, because it's winter and the Stark. I don't know a lot about what the lore was based on. Rumpelstiltskin, because it's silver to gold. Doesn't matter. This book was kind of disappointing for me, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. Okay. Then I read The Maid by Nita Prose. This book is like, I don't want to say, this book is kind of like a cozy mystery. So we have Molly, who is a maid. She works at this hotel, and one day she finds a dead body. And what even fucking happens? This book was so weird. Oh, yeah, she's just, like, trying to figure out what happened and sort of uncover, and then she kind of freaks out she has friends, and, like, you know, just kind of this, like, really predictable little mystery. I didn't dislike it, but it wasn't anything special. It was a quick, easy read. Like, if you were in a slump, I think this would be a really good book to pick up, because it was literally just, like, Molly finds a dead guy, and then she's trying to just, like, uncover what happened through the course of, like, working at the hotel and, like, trying to figure out what's going on, especially, you know, it struggles because she doesn't really have great social skills. But, yeah, I mean, nothing special. I definitely gonna read the second one, but, yeah, it was fine. Okay. Ugh. And then I read The Queen of Nothing, which is the third and final book in the Folk of the Air series by Holly Black. First one is The Cruel Prince. Second one is The Wicked King. I loved it. Great end to a YA fantasy trilogy. This series, I've talked about this series a lot, so I'm going to keep it really brief, but we have Jude, her and her sisters. Their parents were murdered when they were kids, and they grew up in fairy, and growing up immortal in the fairy world is really difficult, but Jude sort of, like, uses, because her father is, like, a general, her adopted father, the father that murdered her parents, is, like, a general, and so she kind of uses his skills and, like, forges her own way, and just this book. So, I don't really like political fantasies, but because it's YA political fantasy, there's nothing too, like, in-depth politics-wise, which I really liked, and then I just love Jude as a character. I think she might be one of my favorite fantasy protagonists. Like, move over, Selena. That's not true. Aelin will always be, like, the girl, but this book was, again, I just ate it up. It's just such a quick, easy, fun fantasy series to read, and if you are kind of maybe wanting to even get into fantasy, I would so recommend this series. Just, like, twisty and dark, and there's enemies to lovers, and just nothing, you can't really believe anything that anybody says, and just, oh, it's just so good. So I am a little bit sad that the series is done, but I had a great time with it. Then I read The Mysterious Society of Lady Scoundrels by India Holton. This is the first book in the Dangerous Damsels series, which is, like, the weirdest possible setup for a romance book. But it is, like, a historical fantasy romance. So we have, what is our main girl's name? Cecilia. And so Cecilia grew up, and she's a pirate. But don't get your hopes up. They're not actually pirates, because they actually fly their houses. Fucking weird. But anyways, so she is part of the, like, Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels, which was, like, lady thieves that fly their houses. And she meets Ned, who is sort of like an outcast pirate. And they, God, this was another book that took me a really long time to read. Oh, yeah, so Ned works for this man, Captain Morvath, who was, like, a villain. And then, but he meets Cecilia and falls in love with her, sort of. And so then he kind of, like, goes onto her side, and then they're trying to, like, save everybody from Captain Morvath, who has kidnapped the entire Mysterious Society. This book was, I did not like it. I did not like it at all. I thought it was just fucking weird, and I thought it was boring. And I kind of understand it's supposed to be kind of satirical. It's kind of making fun of itself. Just goofy and silly, but it didn't blow me out of the water. I was mildly disappointed. But who can you blame? And then I read Babel Babel. I read Babel by R.F. Kuang. Also talked about this in my finishing books I'm in the middle of. This is a dark academia, magical realism, fantasy book, and we focus on Robin, who his family died of cholera in China, and he is essentially like taken by this professor who brings him to London and trains him all these languages so he can go to Oxford, specifically Babel, which is like the Royal Institute of Translation, where you learn about translation and then inscribe words on silver bars, and once you say the words on those bars, you can imbue them with magic, and they can sort of like advance things. Like if they can like make you invisible, or make ships go faster, make trees healthier and produce better crops, make foundations more stable, and so it's really interesting. And sort of the silver bars are capitalized on by England for like furthering their empire, for use of like colonization, and Robin is kind of caught between like wanting to kind of just like go and do his education, and then also understanding that what's happening is wrong, and sort of being torn between the two. And it's kind of about his journey. Really good, like, found family. This book is very long, but I did like it. Definitely did a little skimming, because there's, oh wait, I really do need to talk about this book. Definitely did a little skimming because there's some long bits just about like kind of like the art of translation, which is cool, but when it's like the fifth one, gets a little bit dense. And yeah, I thought it was good. I thought the ending was, the book was just a fucking ride. And I know that a lot of people, some people liked this book, some people didn't like this book. I think I liked it. I think it was funny. I think it was smart. I think the writing was really good. I think the premise was super interesting and original. I think that all the characters were great and well-rounded. But definitely a dense read, so only read it if you're in the mood. Okay, and then I read Sizzle Reel by Carlin Greenwald. Hopefully by the time I'm posting this, my reading summer books video will be up. Which is funny because I've only read one book for that video when I'm filming this. Who cares? You know, I'll get them. This is a like queer sort of coming of age contemporary book. Focus on Luna, who came out as bisexual and then is trying to figure her life out. And when she wants to figure her life out, she decides that she needs to lose her virginity to a woman. And she decides that woman is going to be an A-list actress named Valeria Sullivan. God knows why she couldn't pick anybody else. And so her two best friends, Romy and Wyatt, sort of hop on this train and are like, all right, we're gonna hook you up with this girl. And it's just, this book, I had a lot of high hopes for it. The cover's really cute. I think the premise is really interesting. The premise was interesting. And I thought it would be, I mean, it's kind of obvious where the romantic direction is going to go, even if you read the back of the book. Very obvious where the romantic direction was going to go. So, that was kind of meh. And then just, Luna honestly acted like a 16-year-old girl. And I couldn't really excuse a lot of her actions. And honestly, the biggest hang-up in this book is that Luna doesn't really understand what queer sex is. So, like, she's really hung up on the concept of virginity and the fact that she's still a virgin. And I understand that the concept virginity being a construct is like a more progressive view possibly for some people, but we do make out that Luna is maybe a progressive person. She lives in LA, she's a cinematographer. Oh my god, I was really disappointed by this book. I will definitely not be picking up, especially because it was blurred by Ashley Herring Blake, who wrote Delilah Green Doesn't Care, which is like queer rom-com icon shit. Like, anyways, so I don't know. if you want a book that makes you really want to travel to Los Angeles, and a book about a 24-year-old who doesn't know what's going on and cannot figure out her life. I mean, like, is she 24? You know, like, I'm in it. I'm 25, you know, shit's hard sometimes, but her lack of just, like, understanding of anything that was going on was sort of wackadoo. So, yeah. Okay, last book. And then I read Always Only You by Chloe Leese. This is the second book in the Bergman Brothers series, which is just a series of, like, interconnected romance novels that focus on a member of this, like, super large Swedish American family. So the first book I read, I'm also going to include the cover. So they got new covers. And I'm going to include the covers for the first and second book because I think that the cover for the first book, I just want everybody to appreciate how fucking gorgeous it is. I mean, look at this cover. I can't see it. I'm picturing it in my mind, but you can see it and you know it's gorgeous. But we're talking about Always Only You. This is another hockey romance. Weird. This is about Frankie and Ren, and Frankie is the social media manager for a hockey team, I think in LA, somewhere in California. And Ren is the co-captain, like, June 2nd captain. What the fuck is alternate captain? Number 2. He's the first mate on the hockey team. And so they are sort of friends. Like, Frankie is autistic and she has rheumatoid arthritis, so she's got a lot going on, and she kind of just puts on like, this is grumpy sunshine, but, like, Frankie is the grumpy person because, you know, she's got a lot going on, and she kind of just puts on, like, a mask for being out in public, and especially dealing with, like, a bunch of hockey players and managing their social media. Probably can't be easy. Bunch of man children. So this book, her and Ren has been pining for her for, like, 3 years, and kind of starts not taking steps, but, like, you know, he's always trying to spend time with her, and then through some forced proximity stuff, she ends up staying with him for, like, a week, and then they slowly kind of start to build their relationship, and she realizes that he's a great guy, and just tell me why this book made me cry, honestly. I was lukewarm on the first one in the series. I thought it was pretty good. It wasn't, like, breaking any boundaries. And then I read Two Wrongs Make a Right by Chloe Leese, and I wasn't that impressed with it. Kind of let me down. So I wasn't going into this book with, like, I wasn't going into this book with a lot of expectations, but it really blew me out of the water. Frankie and Ren were so good together, and just, like, Ren was, his communication was excellent, and Frankie was amazing, and just, like, I literally cried reading this book, and I don't know, I didn't think it was going to get that deep, but it got that deep, and it's just, like, just, I thought the romance was amazing. I thought their banter was really good. I thought they were cute. I thought the sex scenes were, and I also know that when I get to Ziggy's book, I'm gonna cry like a fucking baby. Cry like a little bitch. But yes, I really recommend the series. You can obviously just skip to the second book, but I do think the first book was worth a read, and I'll definitely be continuing on with the series. The second book is For After Always. They're kind of like funny titles because she says the title in the book, you know? It's kind of funny. Anyways, I thought this book was so great and so sweet and really funny and just adorable and amazing, and I loved it, and you should read it. And with that, we've talked about all 18 of the books that I read this month in August. Hopefully I won't be posting this video 11 days after August has ended like I did last month, but, you know, time will tell. So thank you for watching. My name is Emma, and I like books, and if you like books too, you should, I don't know, comment, like, subscribe, tell me what I should read next. Thank you.